Thank you all for joining us today for one of our Beyond School Hours webinars. I'm so glad that you all could join us. If you don't mind taking a moment to put your name and where you're from in the chat, maybe turn on your video so we can all see who's with us today. My name is Paula Houghton, and I'm the Director of Outreach and Engagements at Foundations, Inc. We're a national education nonprofit located in Mount Laurel, New Jersey, which is just outside of Philadelphia. We're best known for our Beyond School Hours conference, which is an annual professional development event. This year, we're going to be in Orlando. I just posted the information for that in the chat. We have these webinars every week, and next week we have Jody Grant from the After School Alliance joining us for a special conversation with Jody Grant, and I'll post the information for that in the chat as well. Today, we have Jessica and Susie with us from PCS Edventures, and we're so glad to have them. They're going to be talking to us about STEM podcasting, and without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Jessica.
And actually,
I'm going to turn it over to Susie.
Yeah. And then after that, I'm going to turn it back over to Jessica. So, hi, everybody. My name's Susie Hayslip. I've worked with PCS now for, just over 20 years. I don't want to date myself too much, but I've specialized in helping educators implement STEAM programs for formal and informal learning environments. We've worked with Beyond School Hours for so many years, attended their conference and come and present, and we just love their show. So we're very excited for the opportunity to work with them today and continue on with the webinar series. And just to give you a little bit more information about PCS Edventures, for those of you who don't already know us, we are a curriculum development company, and we're based in Boise, Idaho. We've been around since the 80s, originally known as Pat's Computer School. And we started off by offering after-school computer programs, and then that grew into a network of learning centers and outreach programs. And today, what we do is we offer solutions for learners for kindergarten through 12th grade at more than 7,000 sites around the world. We work with a ton of 21st century community learning centers, libraries, maker spaces, Girl Scouts programs, anywhere that is interested in STEAM and STEM, we have been involved with. So we really focus on putting together great curriculum and packages that include not just the scripted lesson plans, but also all of the materials that you need to serve up to groups of students. So we really focus in on STEAM enrichment. And then for our agenda today, I'm just going to read through what our original topic was. So we're going to explore how podcasts can be used to stimulate interest in STEAM, teach essential digital media skills, and be used as a means of artistic impression. In this interactive session, you're going to learn how the digital media arts can capture the imagination and amplify student voice, and how podcasts can be revolutionary tools for STEAM learning. Today, you're going to be able to walk away with resources to create original stories through collaborative learning, curated content from top podcasters, and strategies to break down the podcasting process step by step for accessibility to all learners, and especially the English learners. And then on to Jessica. Jessica joined the PCS team as an independent contractor in summer 2021, and is thrilled to be combining her love for STEM education and through her passion with writing. A Jersey girl through and through, she shared that she might be sharing that Jersey accent here with us. She graduated from Rider University, earning her Bachelor of Arts in both elementary education and English, while working as a 4th grade, 5th grade teacher. Jessica designed and facilitated workshops for educators at her school district, K through 5 science, or as a science educational coach. And since then has continued to help reimagine education as a copywriter and instructional designer. Jessica's a lifelong learner. She really enjoys exploring new topics and education wherever she can. And in her free time, she can be found reading, watching food-based competition shows, and spending time with family. Everybody, welcome Jessica.
Hi, everybody. I guess I should add listening to podcasts to that as well, especially during this presentation, although food shows are my love. All right, so thank you, Susie. Hi, everyone. I'm so excited for you to be joining us today. We're going to go through our Discover Podcasting Program Lab. And like Susie said, we're going to walk away with some resources that you can use right away with your students. So hang on for that. And we're also going to be looking for some brave souls to share out. So if you have your video on, that would be amazing. And then throughout, I'll ask for some participation. And if you want to unmute and chat with us, then that would be amazing. Okay, so Discover Podcasting Lab. These are just some of the awesome features that are included in it. Aside from being standard aligned and easy to use in any learning environment, I love how hands-on it is. And we really try to do that with all of our programs. Learners are truly creating and managing their own podcast shows, and it happens right before your eyes, which is pretty incredible to watch, and they really love it. So why the digital media arts? Well, as I said, it's very hands-on, but what I like about it a lot is that it gives learners different entry points into STEM, right? So we always hear about science, we always hear about math, but the arts sometimes kind of get like some people don't even say STEAM, right? Some just say STEM. So podcasting is definitely an art form, and it's a great way to get students to see different avenues into that world. We're also going to take a really in-depth look at the different careers that students will explore throughout the program. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. So why podcasting? Well, it amplifies student voices, and especially coming out of the isolation and insanity of the past couple of years, it's a great way for students to be able to be heard, to express themselves, and it's really great for mental health. So that social emotional learning piece really comes into play with podcasting. It can be done remote or in person. We use a collaborative digital platform called Soundtrap that you're actually going to hear a little bit more about toward the end of the presentation, so stay tuned for that. But it can be used at home or in the classroom. So if students are working on something at home in the classroom, and then they go home and want to continue that work, they can do that collaboratively through Soundtrap. And podcasting is so collaborative. We're going to see that today. These are some quick snapshots of some of the multi-subject integration pieces that were mentioned on the last slide. And we also include a lot of cross-curricular extensions that are featured throughout lessons, throughout the program. So making sure you're hitting on different storytelling elements and different math and sciences as well. All right, so we actually worked with a lot of subject matter experts throughout the creation and development of this program, and they were really integral to the creation of our lessons and activities to make sure that they were authentic and valuable. And it really sets it apart from other podcasting programs that are out there. One of the people we worked with was a woman named Karen Peterson. She is an ELL teacher from Manhattan, and she works mostly with Mandarin speaking students. And she had her students actually submit an episode to NPR's Student Podcast Challenge in 2020, where they were the middle school grand prize winners. She has since continued that club, and they have been featured in programs such as CNN's United Shades of America. So they're doing a lot of great work over there with their podcast. So we learned a lot from her about how to get students involved in this. These are her students. They call themselves the Dragon Kids, and they were the winners that year in 2020, where they interviewed 10th graders about harassment and racism that they experienced in their public school. And they weaved their Mandarin language into the podcast as well to kind of bring that cultural background. We're going to talk more about them in a bit, so you will see them again. This is Mark Sanchez. He is the producer of Brains On and American Public Media. And what's cool about what he does is his episodes are actually written and driven by student questions, and then their students serve as co-hosts on the podcast. His understanding of how to get kids interested in STEAM and topics and the expertise that goes with podcasting really made him an ideal collaborator for us. And finally, Frankie Burnhill. She's the senior producer of Idaho Matters and of Want to Know Idaho, which is an audience-powered podcast. She's also an award-winning journalist. And as a subject matter expert, she provided insight into real-life work processes that podcasters produce and radio journalists, from pitching stories and preparing for interviews and gathering ambient sound on location. So we worked with her quite a bit. These are Lovey and Sean. Lovey and Sean created these awesome videos that support learners throughout the entire process. They're available online, and they serve as great mentors as a real world mentors for throughout the process of learning how to podcast. Okay, so we said that they get to experience all different careers, right? So learners take on several roles throughout the entire 12 lesson program. So on day one, they form their teams. And then maybe on day 2, they step into the shoes of a lead producer or a host. And then the next lesson, maybe voice actors. So that by the time they get to around lesson 7, they're ready to really take on one role that they feel most confident and comfortable in. And that really sets them up for success in that role. And they get a great feel for the different careers and paths that are included in the industry. We really break down the process for learners. So one of the ways that we do that is by starting with choosing a podcast topic, which seems pretty simple, but it can be very overwhelming at first, right? You think, how am I going to figure out what it is I want to talk about when there's so many things I can speak about? And pitching is a strategy that is used by the professionals. If you look on the screen in blue, it says, I want to do an episode about blank. It's interesting because blank. And that language actually comes straight from a professional development among podcast producers. So we use that with our students to start getting them to think about what it is that they're interested in and help them prepare to pitch to their students or to their group members and say, hey, this is an idea that I want to put forward. Makes them feel a little bit more confident by giving them those sentence starters. And it makes the process very collaborative when they come together to meet. There's also things like choosing a name for a podcast, right? So we're back at those Dragon Kids that we spoke about earlier who won the podcasting competition. And if you see their logo up at the top, they're from New York. So they have the Brooklyn Bridge back there. Their school logo is their mascot rather is the dragon. So they have the dragon front and center. They include their name in Mandarin as that's the language most of them speak. So we go through different ways that these mentor podcasters are using information to put out an image to their audiences and then say who they are either through visual art or audio art. They also made sure that they included kids in each of their episode titles because it was really important to them for their audiences to know who was giving them the information that they were getting. And what I really love about the Dragon Kids is they're a great mentor for students because kids can see kids their age accomplishing big things, sharing their own ideas. They're really great mentors for our young learners. Our program uses sticky board storytelling strategy. Say that 10 times fast. It's the same program. It's the same strategy that the pros use. You can see there that the wall is kind of wallpapered with different colored sticky notes. And that's really because hosts don't typically read from a script. It's usually more organic and they have a conversation or a storytelling. So they use this sticky note strategy to have things that they can easily refer to while they're speaking. This is an example from the Dragon Kids. It's something we use in our program as well, where the yellow cards are for what the host will want to share, and the blue sticky notes indicate the plans for sound and music. Their teacher, Karen Patterson, said that this was especially helpful for her ELL students. It makes the process really easy to revise, and it's really easy to move things around instead of just having, that one very long script for your whole episode. So, sorry, 1 second. So day 1 is about familiarizing our learners with podcasts and what they are and why it's such a popular platform for audiences. And each lesson begins with guiding questions, right? Teachers, we all know that we love our guiding questions. So I'm actually going to open this up to all of you. Why do you think people create podcasts? And what if you were to create your own podcast, and this might be important later, what would it be about, and what would you want to share with people and why? So if you would like to share out on either of these two things, I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself. And if you can turn on your video, because we're going to have a couple of these things later on, I'd love to see who we're chatting with. Anyone want to share? Oh, someone asked, is this recorded? Yes, I believe it is. Anyone know why people might create a podcast?
They have something to share with people.
Absolutely, right? Just the general, like, hey, I have a message that needs to get out there, whether that's an important event or like a commentary on an important event, or even, I don't know, this morning I found out Boy Meets World is doing a whole rewatch and made a podcast about that. So maybe you just want to share out something that you watched as a kid and live nostalgia. That could be another reason as well. Any others?
Yes, I would like to say, I'm sorry I can't come on camera right now, but if I had to do a podcast, I would probably do it about youth development, since, that's kind of like the area where I work in. I absolutely love the work, and I've had so many great experiences. And so that is something that I can talk about like all day, every day. So if I had to do a podcast, it would certainly be something in that area, pertaining to youth development.
Right. I love that. It's something that you know really well, right? You want to share something that you kind of feel like you're an expert on. Awesome.
Absolutely.
All right. So, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just think another reason people maybe do podcasts is they want to build a community of people that are like-minded. It's a way to get conversations going and kind of grow their own learning as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's not just about what we can teach others, but what you can learn from them as well. So some of the different podcast formats that you probably see or are most familiar with are educational podcasts, nonfiction storytelling, fiction storytelling. My personal favorite is conversational podcasts or interviews. And then there's always a combination of a bunch of those different ones. So your students may be interested in one or many of those. Our day one lesson gets learners interested for what best suits gets them thinking about what best suits their interest. And to do that, we kind of try a choose your own adventure type of activity. So I love these because they really remind me of those magazine quizzes that we all used to take at like in the middle of a magazine, like Kids Bop or whatever, or Kid Tiger Beat, whatever it is. And you would answer yes or no questions and follow a flow chart and decide ultimately what your best fit was, like whatever the quiz was about. So you can see on here that there are questions like, do you make up stories or like to tell stories in funny voices? Do you like to tell true stories about your family or maybe news events and famous people? And this kind of activity really sets our learners up to feel successful when they get to that pitching section, right? So they feel like, all right, I'm pitching my idea and I have an idea of where I want this to go. Really sets them up for success. The day two lesson is all about how to create a compelling story and develop a strong hook. And that's where we're going to spend a good chunk of our time focusing on today. We're going to take a look at some examples. And at the end of it, I'm actually going to have you all create your own story. And maybe we'll have some brave volunteers to share that out as well. So stay tuned for that. I'm very much looking forward to hearing what you'll have to say. We always start with an objective, as you, I'm sure, know as teachers. Today, our objectives are I can outline and practice telling a story like a slammer. We'll talk about that in a second. And I can create a hook in my story that gets my audience's attention. So you can see that these podcasting strategies tie really well into our ELA curriculum as well. So again, for you guys, what makes a podcast compelling? What makes you want to listen to it? And how do the hosts of the podcast you listen to typically get your attention? What are some strategies they use?
I think for me, it's when it's a story and it's not just somebody.
When they have a kind of you cut out a little bit on my end, but I think you said you like when people tell a story and when it's not someone just talking at you. Is that correct? I agree, for sure.
I love podcasts when they like tell a story, but also like interview people at the same time so they can like both say different stories. And I really, really get attracted by that.
Me too. So who you bring on, how they're connected to your overall topic, whether or not they're somebody that's maybe important in that industry or that genre. All right, so let's talk a little bit about what is story slamming. So story slamming is when you tell a true story about something that's going on in your life in front of a live audience. So there's an organization called the Moth that does this all of the time. It's in New York City. They have shows in big venues, small venues, and basically writers will, or storytellers, I guess, will put their name in a hat. And if your name is chosen out of the bag, you get to get on stage and you get 5 minutes to tell whatever story you would like to tell. And that's a great intro for podcasting because, as I said before, hosts don't usually speak from a script, right? They're usually more off the cuff. It's about that storytelling. It's about connecting with the audience. So we use story slamming as a great intro for that. The Moth uses a kind of graphic organizer to keep our audiences interested and kind of give storytellers a path that they should follow in order to keep their story engaging. We're going to refer back to this a lot, and you're actually going to see if you were able to print out the freebie that was sent over to you. If you weren't, that's okay. You can follow along just fine without it. But I do think if you have some paper and pencil down with you for later on, that would be helpful. But not yet. So you're okay if you don't have it right in front of you right now. But we'll be using a graphic organizer that follows this map that Moth suggests for telling an engaging story. We're going to do that by taking a look at a student named Dante, who actually does a story slam in front of a live audience. So we're going to see that in a moment. One of the ways that we can hook our audiences is by, or several of the ways, is by creating a mystery at the beginning of the story, painting a picture for them, asking an engaging question, or using a surprising fact. And we pulled these right from our unit. They're also, again, featured in the freebie. So it's called Geek Out with STEM Podcasting. So you can see that there again with those images. All right, so we're going to take a look at a student named Dante Jackson. He tells a story about the prom. It's like the 8th grade prom. And we're going to watch it in segments. This first segment, segment is specifically about the world as it was, right? So what was the world like when your story began? What was your world? And as we watch this segment of the video, I want you to think about, what was Dante's hook? Was it a mystery, painting a picture, asking a question, or using a surprising fact?
Come on, Dante. Come on. All right. Whew. Okay. Back in middle school, I wasn't really the type of kid to let myself have any fun. I was afraid that if I let myself have fun, I'd end up being judged. 8th grade comes around, prom is coming up, everybody's talking about it. Hey, you going to prom? I'm going to prom. You know what you're wearing? You know who you're going with? Oh, I know what I'm going with. But me, I wasn't planning on it. I didn't really want to go. I thought I'd just skip it. I thought I'd just end up being a kid in the corner, chicken in hand.
All right, so can anybody share out, what do you think Dante's hook was? How did he kind of hook us in right at the start there?
I felt like he was painting a picture.
Oh, absolutely, right? He no mystery involved there, right? You're seeing him looking around, even without if you didn't have the video, right? You're able to visualize him looking around saying, hey, I don't think this is for me. I'm not feeling this. And we see why, right? So definitely painting a picture. Thank you, Vicki. I don't want to watch that again. Hold on. All right. So then we move on to our second spot in the graphic organizer. And that's the part that says, and then one day, right? So the world as it was, and then one day something happens, something subtly changes that makes it different for our speaker. So we're going to take a look at what sets the story in motion, what changes for Dante, and then you can kind of make a prediction. What do you think is going to happen next in the story? So what sets our story in motion for Dante, what changes, and then what do you think is going to happen next?
After being constantly bugged by friends and family, I decided, you know what the heck, might as well go. let's just hear what it's going to be about. So, graduation and prom was on the same day. Graduation was early on in the day. We sang Celine Dion. I hated it. So, I go home, I get dressed, I throw on my suit, have my little fedora on, you know, stunting. And I should mention that at first we had no idea how I was going to get there. We knew no buses that ran by. So we figured we were going to take a cab, but my friend Shannon comes, she says, hey, my mom got a truck, you can swing by, my mom will drop you off. I'm like, oh, cool. So my mom was okay with it. They knew each other. We decided to go along with the plan. So I'm going to my friend Shannon's house. It's a block away from my house. We're all outside chilling. My mom's taking a bajillion pictures. You know how to get around this kind of time. Shannon comes outside, and typically she's a tomboy. She's usually just wearing shirt, jeans, sneakers. That's it. But she comes out, she got her hair down, she got her little white dress on, she got the real huge hoop earrings, you know. So now I'm standing here, I'm like, huh. Well now. So we get in the truck. It's about a 15, 20-minute drive, not very long. So I go inside. The space is a little bit smaller than I thought it would be. Granted, it's not a lot of us, but it was pretty fancy looking, and I thought it was a good place to be. Music starts playing. Everybody's on the dance floor. I'm in the corner, standing there, chicken in hand.
All right, so let's start with that first question. What kind of sets the story in motion? What changes for Dante? And I see some of you are utilizing the chat, so that's great. If you're not comfortable coming on to speak with us out loud yet, that's okay. You can definitely write your answers there as well. But if you are willing to speak, feel free to do that as well.
What changes is he decides to go to prom. He's going to take this leap.
Sure. And what are some things that maybe make him make that leap, right? What inspires him to make that leap?
His friends and family.
Yeah, definitely. His friend is attractive all of a sudden. Absolutely, Pamela. I see that in the chat. Yeah, right. He sees, hey, like maybe this is a big deal. This is something that's important. My friends care about it. My family cares about it. It sets kind of that little bit of a change for him. Do we have any predictions about what might happen next in his story? And I noticed before we answer that question, somebody in the chat had mentioned that he uses humor as a tool for sharing his story. And absolutely, that's something that if that's your style, it's a great way to pull your audience in, using humor. Okay, so anybody have a prediction of what might happen next? Cynthia thinks that maybe he'll fall in love. Any other predictions?
I'm thinking he's definitely he's definitely going to position his attention on the girl.
Okay, definitely right. We've maybe a callback to some character we've already met. Somebody said he'll finally eat that chicken, which is my favorite answer that I've heard so far. Let's take a look at what happens. But first, back to our graphic organizer. If I can get there. There we go. All right. So the Moth Story Map does include these two other points of raising the stakes and the moment of change. But we're really going to focus on that last one, which is the world as it is now, which kind of encompasses those two pieces all together, right? So now we've gone through what it was, and then one day, and now what is it? Jason says Dante may no longer be a wallflower. Let's see. So in this segment, we're looking for what is different about him after the dance, and how do you think he's going to face future situations that make him uncomfortable?
I had a few people come up to me and try to pull me on the dance floor, but I wasn't moving. I was not moving. I wasn't moving for anything but chicken. So the DJ decides to put on this song, and now he's saying, you know, everybody that's not dancing, You gotta grab them, pull them on that dance floor. Anybody, you see anybody standing on the wall, you gotta grab them, bring them on the floor. So I try not to make myself look suspicious, so I start doing a little. I start doing a little two-step. This is where it was at. So gradually over time, I start getting more into it. The little two-step turns a little to a shuffle. That shuffle turns into a crisscross. And that crisscross turns into a God knows what. I don't even know what I was doing anymore. I just know that I'm on fire. So, and it turns out that was one of the best nights of my life. And it's like my life up until that point. I was locked in a dark room, but then I decided to unlock the door and I took a step out. And I learned how to dance.
I just adore Dante. I think he is so sweet. So what is different about Dante after the dance? Yeah, confidence, Patricia says. He definitely has more confidence. Yeah, it was a surprise ending for sure. Pamela says it's amazing how we can allow fear to imprison us. Definitely. Right, so we see that he's kind of coming out of his shell, which I think somebody did predict. He sees himself as a changed person, and why do you think that'll affect him in his future, right? So what is he going to do when faced with future uncomfortable situations? Definitely take more chances. Yeah, maybe more of a risk taker, try new things, right? So there's a lot of different lessons that we can get out of Dante's story. And so one of the reasons that I like Dante's story so much is because students really connect to him, right? He has a story that a lot of kids can relate to. Just gonna mute. Sorry, I muted you, Sherry. A lot of different experiences that kids can relate to. And we use Dante's story as a mentor piece in our writing to get students familiar with how to share their own stories and what storytelling really is like. And you can see, obviously, he did not use a script. He was talking off the cuff, and that made it all the more exciting to listen to. Okay, so this is where I'm really gonna ask you guys to try to do what Dante did and come out of your shell and hopefully share out, or maybe some of you are already out of your shell and are very excited to share with us. We're going to try an activity that you can do right away with your students. It is based on our freebie Geek Out with STEM podcasting. It was sent to you. It looks like this. And the focus of that, the prompt that we use in there to get students to start telling their story is tell a story about how you first discovered your passion. Right? So did someone introduce it to you? Did you learn about it on your own? Was it important to you, or why was it important to you rather? Like for me, it might be my interest in scrapbooking, or I saw someone in the chat, maybe Paula said I might talk about my interest in food competition shows, right? So something that is you're really passionate about, something you would like to share, because we know that a lot of podcasts, like I mentioned earlier, there's ones about TV shows, there's ones about professions, right? Somebody had shared out that they would like to do a podcast about something they're really passionate about, a profession. So think about a passion you have and how it started, how you really got into it, and why it's so important to you. The guidelines for recording, and this is being recorded, but we're thinking just when we share out, right? Your story would be about 2 to 3 minutes. So it's nothing long, it's quick. You might want to use one of the hooks we talked about to get your audience's attention. You're going to use your visual outline, and I'm going to show you that in a moment, but I'm really going to stress that you draw more, and you're going to see why in a second. And make sure that your last sentence is clear, right? We knew when Dante's story ended, he said, right? That's when I learned how to dance. And he wrapped up his story quickly. So we knew it was a clear end. So if you did get a chance to print out the freebie, this is basically what the graphic organizer looks like. It's just oriented a little differently. But it has a section for you to look at the world as it was, and then the stakes were raised, and the world as it is now, right? So the same path that we've been following with Dante. There is a section for notes, and I encourage you to use that maybe just to jot down some ideas or some brainstorming. But where you want to focus the bulk of your intention is drawing a picture that represents that part of the story. And the reason that we stress that is because, especially for our learners who, really want to be glued to that script and just write everything out, this is a quick planning strategy for them, right? So you can kind of visualize the story yourself, and then you can kind of talk off the cuff. It also is great for our ELL learners, right? That they can just draw instead of having to write everything out and then be able to articulate their story. So I'm going to stress that you really focus more on those sketches than you do on your notes. You don't want to really write it out too much. So these are just some final tips from Moth. So that the things that you want to think about as you're planning your story. How are you going to hook us in? Do you want to just like Dante, state your fears, state your desires of getting into that passion. Observations that you may have made, how you're going to pull us in. He used humor. There are definitely other strategies. If you think of any, feel free to put them in the chat to share with people or share out. And at the end, what changed about you, right? What was different? What were you enlightened? Were you defeated? Were you triumphant? What made it a unique experience for you? Anybody willing to share out what they're thinking as a possible passion of theirs, just to kind of spark some ideas among our group?
Before you actually gave us all of the information, I just came up with, which goes to my passion, was a transition from having been burnt out doing after school to doing some curriculum development, which I absolutely loved, to being dumped back into after school, and then finding a real passion in that because of a special moment.
Okay, I'd love to hear that story. And I like that a lot of us are going to be able to probably connect to that as well. Any other ideas? Okay, if you don't want to share out your ideas right now, that's okay. But I'm going to give you about maybe 3 to 5 minutes or so to take a second. If you don't have it printed out, that's okay. You can just sketch 3 different sketches there. I'm going to pull you back on this slide so you can kind of see our sentence starters up there on the top, the world as it was. And then I give you some tips for what you can think about for sharing that story through the story map. Does anybody have any questions for me before we give this a shot? All right, so then I'm going to ask that if you do, put them in the chat or unmute yourself, but I'll give you about 3 or 5 minutes to plan out your story, and then we'll look for some people to hear from. I'm looking forward to it. if anybody is finished and or is willing to share, you can feel free to unmute yourself. And if you don't have to turn on your video, as podcasting is all audio. So if you don't want to turn on your camera, that's okay. But if you are finished and you would like to share out, feel free to do so. Otherwise, if you still need a minute or two, let me know. If you prefer, I can call on you. You can put your name in the chat as like, hey, I'd love to share my story.
I'll share.
Yes, Vicki, let's hear it. And remember, us sharing out is a great way to, we feel comfortable doing the activity here together, then our kids are going to feel a lot more comfortable when we ask them to do it as well. Go ahead.
So my name is Vicki, and I was the director of an after-school program for about 5 years, at the end of which I was really burned out. And during COVID, ended up in remote learning, where I found a passion prepping lesson plans for families who were homeschooling. And then we all went back to school, and I was shunted back into the after-school program. So I spent all year doing my job to the best of my ability, but my heart really wasn't in it. And I kept thinking, I don't want to be doing this. I don't want to be doing this. Come to the end of the year, and there was graduation. And I found out that 9 of my former after-school students were graduating. So of course I had to go. Ended up with a seat in the front row and spent the time smiling as I was watching and all the students do their speeches and all of that. Sorry, got lost here. And I was just grinning because they all had graduated. They'd all gone through really hard things, and they all graduated. Between the speeches and the handing out of diplomas, at our school, the students give out a rose to someone who has inspired them during their educational career. And I continued smiling as I was watching parents and grandparents and teachers getting a rose. Suddenly, I felt a tap on my shoulder, and turning around, standing there was Jeremy, holding out a rose to me. And Jeremy was a student who I'd started working with in 6th grade. He came from a really poor background. He was brilliant, but had no motivation to do anything because he didn't really see anybody in his family having done that before. He became involved in the Sea Perch program, which is an underwater robotics program. And we ended up going to nationals 3 times, which for him was amazing because he had never been out of our small corner of Northern Washington. Seeing him standing there getting that rose, I of course burst into tears, and he thanked me for being there for him. And I realized it had all been worth it, and it would all be worth it in the future.
That was amazing. Thank you so much for sharing, Vicki. So were your sketches, like I'm imagining the image of the student coming and tapping you on the back of the shoulder. Is that like, what are some things that you drew to kind of spark your storytelling?
So a fire at the beginning being burned out, a grind, kind of the grindstone treadmill in the middle, with after school, lesson plans. Right. And then at the end, the rose. Yeah.
Amazing. Very cool. And everyone's on mute, but I'm sure they're all clapping for you as I am. That was really, really great. Thank you so much for sharing. Anybody else willing to? Yeah, Susie said, you made me tear up. Thank you for sharing, Vicki. And everyone said, awesome story. Very good. Anybody else willing to follow up and share?
Yeah, I can share.
Yay, Lydia.
Okay.
All right, go for it. The floor is yours.
Okay. It all started when I accompanied my friend to visit her baby nephew. The boy was just about 3 months old. His mother was a teenage mom. It was evident that she was not ready for this new baby. The house was a trailer packed among trees. The nearest trailer was about 6 feet away. The sound of the Amtrak horn pierced the air, and the entire area smelled of rotten garbage and the remains of some kind of dead animal not too far away. The weather was hot, and the baby cried from the sweltering heat. I stood there as I reflect on my own childless life and my longing to be a parent. I wonder if she would just consider adoption. Who knows? I reached for the child who clinged on to me. Is this a sign? I asked myself. The poor girl seemed overwhelmed and exhausted. I was afraid to ask her the question. I somehow was able to mumble it. Have you ever considered offering up your baby for adoption? Like all the time, she replied, wow, I think I might be willing to do this for you. Would you really? My heart pounded, my feet trembled, but I held on to the little baby. The process took about 3 months, and I'm so glad I did. The end.
Wow. So that's a true story. Yeah, Lydia?
Huh?
That's amazing. And I love how you were able to paint, like you use that paint a picture strategy beautifully. Like I love in the beginning when you hooked us in with, it smelled like garbage and she clearly wasn't ready. That was an amazing job. Can I ask you as well, like what are some of the sketches that you use to kind of spark your story?
Okay, yeah. So I drew like, you know, like the baby and more like a little bit like the forest area. And I got that idea because I was just off the train this weekend and on the Amtrak, and we were coming back from I was going to New York, and I could see how the train went through some of the neighborhoods, and I just imagined, wow. And as the train, you know, blared the horn, I'm like, I'm so glad I don't live among this area, because I can't imagine how poor people can live in all that noise. So that kind of helped me imagine it.
I love that. And that's a strategy we can share with our students, right? Pulling from, if they are somebody who is lucky enough to kind of get out and see the world, pulling their images from their experiences and bringing them into their podcast. That was awesome.
Thank you.
It is 1:50. If someone has one more that they're willing to share, we might have time to squeeze you in. You have one more brave soul. I know those are tough to follow. All right, well, we'll call it then, just in case. But if you decide you want to change, if you change your mind and you'd like to share out, feel free to do so. But this is something that you can do with your students right away. You can see it's a quick activity. I mean, obviously you would give your learners a little bit more time than I gave you as adults, probably quite a bit more time. But definitely encourage them to use those pictures first and then tell their story orally. It's a great way to kind of get them into that habit of storytelling and being more conversational. And with that, I'm actually going to turn it over to Susie. Susie, are you there?
Oh, there we go. I was trying to get to, anyway. Oh my gosh, those stories were just wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. My mother was a college professor and passed away 2017 now, but I just remember her students sharing, their thoughts on her at her memorial. And so when you were talking about that podcast earlier, it just kind of got me teary. So anyway, we're telling about your story. So thank you so much for sharing. This has just been such a great program to be a part of, just your voice able to come through and share these things and learn from them. And I know everybody's going through a lot for the last couple of years, especially. So it's been nice to hear your stories. Well, so as another opportunity for you guys, we are going to offer a free trial for Soundtrap, which is the software that goes with our podcasting lab, the Discover Podcasting Lab. And so I believe on that slide, Jessica, you have a link up there to where they can go to our landing page and then just fill out your information. And in the notes, make sure to put in that you would like to get the podcasting free trial. And then we'll send you out a separate email that has all of that information about how to get set up. The other thing that I would like to share is that we do have the Discover Podcasting Lab. And so there's going to be a link that we share there as well. And this is an opportunity. So if you are working an after school program or even an in-school program, it gives you all the materials plus the 12 lessons and some of which that you've experienced today. So if you're looking to bring this type of a program to your programs, that's an opportunity to go check that out. And I think that was about it for me.
One question I had really quickly, because this was amazing, and I think my middle school students would just die over this. Does this work with Chromebooks? Because that's something we've run into so often, is that things don't work on Chromebooks.
Absolutely. Yep. And that was one thing that we wanted to make sure of, because we've had that same issue. And so it does work with Chromebooks. That's a great question. Do we have other questions out there? Anybody wanted to share or have questions about the program, or even to be able to share what you're already doing in your program? Hello?
Well, I think
Jessica back. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm back. Go ahead, Paula.
I was just going to say, this has been really great. So much good information and such a good idea to use podcasting in, after school and classrooms to integrate all these different kinds of learning. It's such a great idea. I want to thank everyone for coming. And if you do need a certificate of attendance, there's a link in the chat that you can fill out. We also appreciate it, even if you don't need a certificate attendance, if you fill it out just to give us your feedback about the webinar and what kinds of things you took from this webinar that'll be useful for you. So it helps us plan future webinars. Next week, we have Jody Grant from the After School Alliance here for a conversation about what's affecting you and your communities and your after school programs. We have webinars every Wednesday at 1 p.m. So I'm going to put the link in the chat for that if you'd like to sign up for future ones. I'd also like to remind you all that registration for Beyond School Hours is now open. That is in February, and it's a really great time. As Susie mentioned, PCS Edventures is always there, and they you can maybe meet Susie in person and talk more about this kind of program. We'd love it also if you followed us on social media, and hopefully you'll join us next week. Thank you again to Jessica and to Susie. This again was so great, and we really appreciate you being here with us today.
Thank you. Well,
Thank you for having us.
Right, we're going to probably put in for podcasting and do this workshop again if we get picked at Beyond School Hours, so we can look forward to that.
Great. I hope so.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for coming today. I hope to see you all next week and then again in February.